My sister laughed before the doctor even finished the sentence. We were sitting in a narrow hospital room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee from the nurse's station down the hall. I was still wearing the thin blue gown, the kind that never quite closes in the back, and my phone was face down on the tray table because I didn't want to look at it. My sister leaned against the wall with her arms crossed, smiling like we were at a dinner party instead of an oncology wing. When the doctor said my name and explained why I had been admitted overnight, she snorted. Not a nervous sound, a sharp, dismissive laugh. She said, "You've always been dramatic," and then looked at the doctor as if he might agree. I remember the exact way the doctor paused. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't frown. He simply looked at her, then back at the chart in his hands and then back at me. He asked her to step outside when she didn't move. He repeated himself, firmer this time. That was when she rolled her eyes and said, "Fine," like she was indulging him. The door closed behind her with a soft click and the room felt suddenly larger. The doctor sat down on the rolling stool and spoke to me like I was the only person in the building. He explained my test results carefully, answered my questions, and told me what the next steps would be. Before he left, he said something that stayed with me long after the 4 was removed. He said, "You don't have to justify being here to anyone." That moment didn't come out of nowhere. It landed on top of years of smaller moments that had been dismissed, minimized, or laughed away. My sister had always been louder than me, more confident, quicker to speak. In our family, that translated into being seen as stronger, more capable, more deserving of attention. I was the one who organized holidays, handled paperwork, paid bills when our parents needed help. She was the one who told stories at dinner and made everyone laugh. When she teased me, it was framed as affection. When I objected, I was told I was too sensitive. Over time, I learned that silence was easier than explaining myself. The hospital visit was supposed to be simple. I had been feeling unwell for months, rushing it off as stress, pushing through work days and family obligations. When my primary care doctor insisted on tests, I complied without making a fuss. When the results came back concerning, I didn't tell anyone right away. I scheduled the hospital appointment, arranged coverage at work, and packed a small bag. My sister found out because my mother mentioned it casually on the phone. She insisted on coming with me, saying it would look bad if I went alone. I didn't have the energy to argue. In the waiting room, she scrolled through her phone while I filled out forms. She complained about the chairs, the lighting, the parking. When the nurse called my name, my sister stood up first as if the appointment belonged to her. Inside the room, she answered questions that weren't directed at her, corrected me when I described my symptoms, and made jokes when the nurse took my vitals. I told myself it was fine. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that once we got the information, everything would settle. Instead, it escalated. When the doctor explained that I would need to stay overnight for observation, my sister laughed. When he explained why, she mocked the terminology, mispronounced words, and made a show of being unimpressed. I watched his expression change from polite to controlled. When he asked her to leave, I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that someone else saw what I had been dealing with. Fear that I had allowed it to go on for so long. After she was asked to leave, she didn't come back in. She texted me instead, a stream of messages about how embarrassing it was to be kicked out, how the doctor had an attitude, how she was just trying to lighten the mood. I didn't respond. I watched the 4 drip and listened to the beeping of machines in the hallway. I thought about all the times I had shown up for her, covered for her, smoothed things over. I thought about how tired I was. The next morning, a different doctor came in with a nurse and a folder. They explained the diagnosis, the treatment plan, and the prognosis. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was serious enough to require changes. Medications, follow-ups, lifestyle adjustments. The nurse asked if I had support at home. I hesitated before answering. I said yes, but the word felt thin when they left. I called my employer and explained the situation. Then I called a lawyer. It wasn't a dramatic decision. It felt administrative, almost boring. Over the past year, I had been managing more of my parents' affairs as their health declined. I had power of attorney for medical decisions, access to accounts, a list of responsibilities that kept growing. My sister had been happy to let me handle it all, as long as she could criticize from a distance. The lawyer I called specialized in elder law and family agreements. I told him I wanted to formalize boundaries. I wanted clarity. He asked me to come in when I was discharged. When my sister came to pick me up, she acted as if nothing had happened. She made a joke about hospital food and complained about traffic. I thanked her for the ride and went inside my apartment without inviting her in. Over the next few weeks, I focused on my health. I took my medication, attended appointments, followed instructions. I didn't update her on my condition. When she asked, I said I was handling it. When she pushed, I didn't elaborate. The meeting with the lawyer was straightforward. We reviewed documents, responsibilities, and contingencies. He explained that while I had been acting in everyone's best interest, the lack of formal agreements left room for conflict. We drafted a plan that outlined roles, decision-making authority, and communication protocols. It wasn't punitive, it was clear. I informed my parents, who were more receptive than I expected. They admitted they had relied on me heavily and had assumed my sister would step in if needed. I told them that assumption needed structure. The inevitable confrontation came during a family meeting arranged to discuss my parents' care. My sister arrived late, coffee in hand, and immediately took over the conversation. When the lawyer introduced himself and explained his role, she laughed and asked why things had to be so complicated. He responded calmly, outlining the benefits of clarity and consent. When he mentioned that I would continue as primary decision-maker unless otherwise agreed, she interrupted. She said it wasn't fair, that I was overreacting, that I had always been controlling. The lawyer asked her if she had been willing to take on specific responsibilities in the past year. He listed tasks I had completed, dates, outcomes. He asked if she had objected at the time. She grew quiet. When she tried to deflect, he redirected her gently but firmly. He explained that authority came with accountability, and accountability required participation. The room felt heavy, but it wasn't explosive, it was factual. After that meeting, things changed. My sister didn't stop being herself overnight, but the dynamic shifted. She no longer had unrestricted access to information or decisions. When she made comments about my health, I ended the conversation. When she mocked, I didn't engage. There were fewer calls, fewer messages. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable. Then it felt peaceful. Months later, I ran into the doctor who had asked her to leave. I was at a follow-up appointment, healthier, steadier. He recognized me and asked how I was doing. I told him the truth. I said I was better in more ways than one. He nodded as if that made sense. Before I left, I thanked him, not for the medical care, which was excellent, but for the boundary he enforced when I couldn't. He smiled and said, "We see this more than you think." The aftermath wasn't a dramatic reconciliation or a complete estrangement. It was a recalibration. My sister and I interact now with a distance that feels intentional rather than strained. I no longer attend gatherings out of obligation alone. I no longer absorb jokes that sting. When my parents need help, I provide it within the framework we established. When my sister wants involvement, she has to participate constructively. Looking back, the hospital visit stands out not because of the diagnosis, but because it exposed a pattern I could no longer ignore. Being mocked in that room, in that moment of vulnerability, clarified something for me. Respect isn't granted by enduring disrespect. It's maintained by recognizing when to step back. The doctor didn't humiliate her. He didn't lecture. He simply stopped the behavior. That was enough. I still think about that morning sometimes, the sound of her laugh, the way the room changed when the door closed. I think about how close I came to brushing it off like everything else, and I think about how quiet decisions can alter the course of a family without anyone raising their voice.